What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. This is episode number 3, I think, of Coffee Movement Chats. It's been a little while since we had a coffee movement chat. This morning I've actually got some yerba mate instead of coffee, but grab something and come along and let's have a chat, because today I'm going to talk about movement hierarchy and the hierarchy and how our body prioritizes movement within our bodies. And I think this is a really important idea to look at and consider, because most of us in our training focus just on our muscles. We focus just on, how big of a pump can I get? What muscle can I activate? What muscle is this good for? But you have to realize that your body wants your muscles to work well. But in order for that to happen, it needs to first go through this checklist of hierarchy. And for your brain, for your body, for your nervous system, your joints are at the top of that hierarchy. Your brain wants to preserve and prioritize the quality and the health of your joints above all else. And the way I like to think of it is, imagine your joints are like the eye of a hurricane, okay? They're the epicenter of where the movement happens. And the feedback from your joints and the tissues within your joints to your brain is what dictates what the rest of the structures and tissues around the joint will do. Because joints are the point in our bodies where the movement actually happens, okay? Deep within that joint capsule, that's where the movement happens. And if the brain senses some kind of issue, some kind of injury, some kind of restriction within the joint and at the capsule level, deep within that capsule, then it will put measures in place to try and protect the joint, because its priority, number one priority, is movement, and pain-free movement if it can. So it will do anything to try and prioritize that. Generally, what I see with most people that I work with is that they've had muscle injuries that have persisted for a large period of time. So one really common one is a hip flexor issue, for example. But if you look at a hip flexor issue, the issue is more than likely not stemming from a hip flexor being too tight or too weak. Your hip flexor may be tight and weak, but that is a symptom of the fact that your hip no longer has access to be able to move in the way that it should, to be able to access hip flexion or hip extension, which is one of the primary roles that your hip flexor will play in movement in your body. So if we take the hip as the example, if your ball and socket joint within that hip cannot move and doesn't have the space to be able to move in the way that it was naturally designed to do, then the muscles around that hip are going to tighten up as a response to try and protect that hip joint. Because if you tighten up and restrict movement, then our body preserves our ability to be able to move without pain. Because when we lose access to the range of motion, then we want to go out and go for a run, or we want to squat deep in the gym. We're asking our body now to go into a position in that hip joint that it's not comfortable going into. That's why we need to train the joint. And for me, this was a really big switch that I made when I realized that the brain and body actually adopt by this movement hierarchy. A lot of the issues I was experiencing became a lot more clear to me. And that was because I was addressing the wrong areas. I was trying to address the muscle. And yes, addressing the muscles can help, but when you realize and understand that it is the joint that we really need to focus on, and the joint positions that our body can get into in movement, it starts to have this ripple effect out to all the other tissues in your body. So if you're having painful glutes, tight hip flexors, groin issues, this is more than likely an issue at your hip joint, the ball and socket, the actual joint capsule, more so than it is an issue with your groin, your hip flexor, or your glute. And I see this all the time with people, and this is the area where we always go about targeting, is the joint itself, the positions that the joint can access, because where we put our attention and focus is extremely important in our training and in movement. Because I can do a hip hinge and somebody else can do a hip hinge, and they can look like we're doing quite similar movements, but one can be prioritizing the joint position and what's happening at the joint, whereas the other one can be just like, yeah, I'm trying to feel a stretch in my hamstring, I'm trying to feel a stretch in my glute, and the intent is not on the movement quality and restoring the joint positions necessary to clean up all those other muscular things around. And it's the same with tendon issues, I find. There is an element of we need to address the tissue itself, but we want to understand this hierarchy and then use this in our approach to try to restore and get back our ability to move naturally. Is understand that it starts at the joint And then that is the highest priority for the brain. And then we start ticking things off. But what we generally find is the more closer you can go to source, then the quicker all these other things will clear up. And it's not actually a one by one that you need to do. It's a low hanging fruit. It's a big hitter. Once we hit the joint and improve the quality and the positioning of that joint, then all the other areas around that tend to clear up quite nicely. So big takeaway from all of this is, number one, is your brain will prioritize your joints, okay, the health of your joints above all else. And in terms of its movement hierarchy, that's what it prioritizes. Your body and your brain and your nervous system, its priority is to move pain-free and to be able to do that in the most efficient way that it possibly can. And in order to do that, it will protect and prioritize the structures at the top of the movement hierarchy. And then all the other things below that will start to come into shape once we start cleaning up and prioritizing these areas that the brain and body wants to prioritize. So your big takeaway from this coffee movement chats is to prioritize the health and prioritize the quality of your joints. And that comes from moving them each day, moving them with intent. This can be the difference between spending 30 minutes doing some stretching and decompression work every day, where you focus on the joint positions you're getting into, versus doing that same work, but your intent is not there behind improving the joint, okay? So decompress your joints daily, get them moving every day through different ranges of motion. One of the biggest killers of joint range of motion, and one of the biggest things that will set off that alarm system in your brain, is a lack of movement at the joint. The more you move your joint and the more range you move it throughout, the more you're mapping out that signal. You're giving the brain and the nervous system the lay of the land. It starts to be able to read all these different positions in your joint. But if you're never moving into these varied ranges and different ranges throughout your day and on a regular basis, then that map starts to become a little bit muffled, starts to become a little bit fuzzy, and that's when you start feeling stiff and sore, and that's when the brain turns on its protective mechanisms in the structures below your joint in that hierarchy, which is like the muscles and the tissues around that joint, and it will start tightening them up. So move your joints every day, decompress them, look at the positions your joints are being able to access, and switch your focus and intent from always seeking to what muscle am I training, you know, what muscle is working here, what muscle is not working here, and start thinking of, okay, how can I train my hip? How can I train the joint in the movements and the motions that I want? How can I train my shoulder joint in the movements and motions that I want to restore? And what you'll actually find is, if your goal is to build muscle and get stronger, is that's going to happen a lot quicker, because you're starting to move yourself back to your foundations. And as humans, again, our body and brain's priority is to move well and to move without pain and move as close as possible to the way we were naturally designed to. And the more you can train your body to do that, the stronger foundation you can set at that level, and then build everything on top of that in terms of your strength, your muscle, your cardiovascular endurance, whatever your training goal is. The much better the results you're going to get, the much more sustainable that's going to be, and most importantly, much more enjoyable that's going to be for you, because you're not going to be in pain, you're not going to be suffering with stiffness. Every step you take in the morning is not going to be agony for the first half an hour. So focus on the joint movement hierarchy. Think of your movement hierarchy. It starts at the joint level. Prioritize the strength, prioritize the health of your joints, and you're going to go a long way. So that's it for this coffee movement chats. I think I've kind of chatted through everything that I wanted to get across to you guys here, but let me know in the comments below what you thought. Let me know, have you switched your perspective? Are you still stuck in the cycle of focusing on muscle, and you haven't actually stopped to address the joint? Let me know your experience with this and how that's worked for you. But that's it for this one. Signing off for today, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.